Welcome to this new episode of Scoping Open and Responsible Research and Innovation, the Pattern Policy podcast series where we zoom in on the different aspects of Open RRI from a policy perspective, and we explore how Open RRI skills are being shaped, shared, and scaled across Europe. I am Francesca Foliti, Research and Innovation Project Manager at APRE, the Agency for the Promotion of European Research, and a member of the Pattern Coordination Team, and I will be guiding you through today's episode. So in our second episode, titled Democratizing Research, Skills that Connect Science and Society, we are turning our attention to two key transferable skills that are essential for connecting science and society: citizen science and science communication. These skills not only empower researchers to engage more meaningfully with citizens, but also help build trust, transparency, and inclusiveness in research and innovation. Their relevance is clearly recognized at European policy level as well. In fact, the European Research Area Policy Agenda 2025-2027 includes among its 11 structural policies a dedicated action, policy number 10, aimed at enhancing trust in science through citizen participation, engagement, and science communication. Today, we will explore how different EU-funded projects are approaching these challenges, developing training programs, building digital platforms, and working with institutions to mainstream Open RRI competencies. And we are not doing this alone, of course. We have fantastic guests joining us today and representing two major European projects, REINFORCING and ECS, that are helping reshape how we train, engage, and communicate in research. So I am glad to welcome the REINFORCING Project Coordinator Angela Simone, International Initiatives Scientific Coordinator at Fondazione Bassetti.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me and for having REINFORCING.
And Carolina Doran, Project Officer at the European Citizen Science Association and ECS Project Coordinator.
Hi, really happy to be here and looking forward to the discussions.
We will also hear from our Pattern partners, specifically Aarhus University from Denmark and CISA International School of Advanced Studies from Italy, that will share how these two key skills are being developed and tested through real-world training pilots, helping researchers integrate Open RRI practices into their everyday work. We have here today Christian Nielsen, Associate Professor at Department of Mathematics of Aarhus University, and Nico Pitrelli, Head of Communication Office at CISA, that will bring their contributions to the table as well.
Thanks a lot for inviting me.
Good evening, and I'm also happy to be here with you tonight.
So let's get started and discover how Open RRI skills are moving from theory to practice, from project to policy, and most of all, to society. Let's begin with the Pattern perspective. Pattern is all about equipping researchers with the transferable skills they need to put open and responsible research and innovation into practice in their daily work. To know more, I would like to start with a question for Christian. Christian, how has Pattern approached the training of researchers in citizen science, and what have you learned from this process? And in particular, what kind of feedback did you gather from participants and training managers? Do you see a growing recognition of the need to formally integrate citizen science training into curricula?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So first of all, we followed the pattern methodology in sort of mapping all of or many of the existing resources and performing a gap analysis to trying to find out what are the specific needs and gaps already in the material already available. And so we decided to develop modular trainings on first an introduction to citizen science and also a module on participation, coordination, and community engagement. And we wanted to design these modules for researchers, students, and administrative staff to cover both sort of the theory and the practical exercises. I think the overall feedback we've gained so far has been very positive. Participants have welcomed the opportunity to learn more about citizen science. And we think our practical exercises, which are based on real cases, have been highly appreciated. So people really get to feel familiar with citizen science. I think our participants valued particularly the understanding of how you can integrate citizen science into actual research programs, and also our specific tools for engaging with different types of participants and communities in an effective manner. And I think for our modules, the modularity and the flexibility that our modules have provided have been key strengths for our piloting of the projects. And I think there's also an interest in developing scalable formats for broader adaptation. So I think there is a growing recognition of citizen science as part of scientific research, but also as part of this societal responsibility and engagement. I think there are also some barriers that remain, and these are, for example, limited resources in terms of time, funding, and staff, and also priorities or competition with other priorities in research training. And finally, so I think we can conclude there is still a need for the institutional incentives and more formal frameworks, and our trainings, I think, can feed into this development. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian, for sharing that interesting perspective. Let's now turn to Nico from CISA, who coordinated our pattern training on science communication. Nico, why is science communication such a crucial skill for researchers today? Based on the piloting of the science communication training you conducted, what were the biggest obstacles and misconceptions that emerged when trying to strengthen it as a transferable skill?
Well, science communication is essential today because it does not just transmit facts. It fundamentally shapes how science functions as a public goods, at least in democratic societies. Science communication is a part of a rich ecosystem of practices, from traditional media, science center, podcasts, Citizen Science, as we just already listened, festivals, social media. This matters because the role of science in society is not purely instrumental for researchers. It also connected to ethical and democratical issues. We expect research to inform policy, to help make decisions on one side, but also to be transparent, to be inclusive, and contribute to a shared understanding. Finally, we can say that communication of science, how societies talk about science and negotiate its meaning. What about from our pilot at CISA? We identified several concrete obstacles, let's say. First, and this is perhaps the most persistent, many researchers still see science communication through a so-called information deficit lens, as if the public simply needs to be educated rather than recognizing it as a two-way dialogic process. This is, I think, the main obstacle. Second, there is a lack of formal training paths that cover how to map the ecosystem of communication, how to use different formats, how to engage with different audiences emotionally, culturally, scientifically. Third, institutional structures often don't reward this work. Researchers have limited time to do science communication, scarce support, lack of incentive in hiring and promotion. And finally, there are also genuine fears of misinterpretation, of backlash on social media, of course, but deeply, I would say, fear that communicating science somehow diminishes their perceived scientific rigor, which, of course, is not true.
Thank you very much, Nico. Thank you both. So what we have learned so far from the pattern perspective is that both citizen science and science communication are not just useful add-ons, let's say, but core competencies for building a more open, inclusive, and democratic research culture. And fostering these skills requires action at multiple levels. So from researchers themselves to institutions to the policy frameworks that support them. Let's now broaden the discussion and hear how other European projects are tackling these challenges and what we can learn from each other. We will begin with Reinforcing, which is building a central hub and a platform for open and responsible research and innovation. Angela, can you tell us how your project is supporting organizations in adopting Open RRI and how transferable skills like citizen engagement and citizen science and science communication fit into a bigger picture? From your experience, what are some of the most effective policy mechanisms to strengthen institutional commitment towards the sustainable adoption of Open RRI?
Thank you for the chance to share what Reinforcing is doing on this key topic for us. Reinforcing as Pattern is a Horizon Europe funded project with the ambitious aim of mainstreaming the open, responsible research and innovation approach, which differently from Partner, we define through its acronym ORI. But of course, the approach, the goal is the same. In our case, our targets are organizations and entities dealing with research and innovation at large that would like to embark on the ORI journey and wish to find a place where there is support for these. Reinforce can provide financial supports also, and we have been launching 7 open calls for small projects on different features of open and responsible research and innovation. But we are also providing services and resources and tools to be inspired from and to be adapted to the context in which the organizations operate. So our website, acting as a repository, a central European hub, is collecting experiences and knowledge from the rich past of European funded projects on responsible research and innovation, RRI, and open science, but it is also currently gathering new pathways towards ORI, open responsible research and innovation. This means that by navigating our web platform, organizations and institutions can find a broad range of instruments that can help them experiment with ORI. Reinforcing also provides online training on open RRI topics. And just a few days ago, we concluded a small series of workshops, online workshops on science communication and storytelling. So definitely citizen engagement is absolutely key for us. I come from I come from citizen engagement, and I tend to say that citizen engagement is the central pillar of open responsible research and innovation. Many of the open calls that we have launched revolved around practices of citizen engagement. Thus, institutions that would like to ground citizen engagement can definitely find in Reinforcing the perfect place, a central European hub, to find resources and support to do it.
Thank you, Angela, for the interesting feedback. Finally, let's hear from ECS, European Citizen Science Project, that is actively strengthening a strong and inclusive citizen science community. Carolina, can you tell us how your project is contributing to capacity building in this area and what lessons might be relevant for embedding citizen science as a recognized key skill?
Thank you, Francesca, for this question. I guess I would like to start by saying that it's very nice to meet with these projects again. We meet regularly and see how it's so important that we work together, as we all rely so much on successfully engaging citizens, how it's core to what we all want to achieve towards improving science and knowledge sharing. And of course, ECS has that as one of its core missions. And to address your question in terms of capacity building, I guess we can look at it in terms of skills and training. And for that, ECS is now developing what we're calling the ECS Academy. You can already find it online, and there you will find a lot of self-paced courses, so courses you can do at your own pace on many different topics, general and tailored. For instance, you will find a course that just talks about what is citizen science or an introduction to citizen science, but you would also find a course that talks about citizen science for journalists, and it would take you on a more tailored journey. And most recently, we also developed an interactive course for anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about how to do data visualizations and data analysis. And the aim is that this course actually uses citizen science generated data for the practical part. So it's not fully there yet, but it will be very soon. And we also offer the opportunity within this academy for instructor-led courses. So if there's some content that is there, but one would like to tailor it to a specific audience, you know, a university class or a school, this can also be done. So there's a lot of different ways one can create a learning path. But I guess to more focus on your last question, you know, what kind of skills, so what is relevant for embedding citizen science as a recognized skill? And in fact, together with the Pattern Project, we are developing this citizen science competency framework. So my answer is, I don't have the answer for you, but this competency framework will be a really comprehensive resource to tell us what are the key things we need to learn, what are the key things we need to develop, materials for creating capacity so that we can do design and implement good citizen science projects. And maybe if I can say one more thing is that when we're talking about capacity, I guess we can also talk about infrastructure. And in ECS, we have, of course, our platform, which is the European Hub for Citizen Science Projects. And as others were mentioning, is also a place with a lot of resources devoted to helping people design their own citizen science projects, to not constantly reinvent the wheel, to not repeat efforts and try to build on each other's work. And we also are building and fostering existing networks. So we have a network of citizen science practitioners, and this is coming already from previous projects. We also work with public libraries. We have a network of citizen science ambassadors. We have a network of early career researchers with whom we work together on how to embed citizen science as part of their research methodology. And we also have a network of educators and trainers. And with them, we work together on co-creating resources and identifying gaps, including to policy, but also we deliver training based on their specific needs.
Thank you, Carolina. Thanks to all of you, actually, for these unique insights from your projects. Let's now turn to Aarhus University again, that has been leading the work on developing and piloting a training course on citizen science as a core pattern member. Christian, what do you see as the key ingredients for successfully embedding citizen science into research careers? And how do you see the role of citizen science evolving in the future of research development?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that question. I think throughout our work, we've seen actually these tasks as a key to developing these training resources, and also there are several ingredients that you can point to that would be necessary for embedding citizen science in research careers beyond the training modules. I think it's important to think about institutional support and different types of incentives, so such as recognition in career progression or funding and evaluation for researchers. Our training modules is part of the capacity building that is needing, but I think that there are also a lot of practical skills in how you engage with communities and thinking about ethics and data quality in citizen science projects that are necessary. Our training modules is one way to integrate training in citizen science into the institutions, but you can also think about involving citizen science into curricula. There is a question about collaboration across disciplinary boundaries, because a lot of citizen science projects have interdisciplinary ambitions and also topics to be supported. And there's a question about the infrastructure and resources, so access to digital platforms, coordination tools, funding streams, etc., that are needed to embed citizen science into research careers. And I think the future role of citizen science in research development is, or the way I see it is that I think we need to think about sort of mainstreaming it as a research approach, not only to see citizen science as an add-on or an outreach activity, but really something that can be integral to scientific knowledge production. And I think it's citizen science in this respect can also be seen as a support to other ambitions for research institutions such as open science and societal impact, because I think citizen science, and this is what we've built on in the patent project, is really to align citizen science with responsible research and innovation agendas. So I think in many ways you can think about citizen science in future research to align it with policy and funding instruments, innovate methods and data. And I think at the bottom, we're also talking about a kind of a cultural shift in academia, which is happening at the moment, where you move from kind of a science that is for society to a science that is happening together with society. And I think citizen science is a key element in this.
Great, Christian. Thank you. That was really insightful. Now let's hear from Sissa, that coordinates Pattern's training module on science communication. Nico, what are some of the insights or challenges emerged during the pilot phase of your science communication training? And what do they tell us about how it's perceived by today's researchers?
In our pilots, we try to make visible the breadth of science communication ecosystem, giving researchers opportunity to work in different diverse formats, writing, storytelling, public engagement, digital media, interactive formats. One key insight was that many researchers, once exposed to this diversity, felt more confident. They realized that communicating is not just popularization, but involves narratives, values, emotions, social contexts. For example, this is a concrete case. One researcher in our pilot initially approached the public talk thinking, I just need to simplify my PowerPoint. But through the training, she realized she needed to completely rethink her approach. Who is the audience? What's their emotional entry point into the topic? What stories might resonate with their lived experience, and so on. That shift, from simplification to translation with context was really significant. Others realized how science communication can contribute to democratic citizenship, not only share results, but also involving people in shaping research agendas or understanding scientific uncertainty, which is another important topic. Challenges, of course, remained. Researchers report that engaging with non-specialist audiences often means adapting their language, their assumptions, their pace, things that are obviously not taught in standard PhD training. Also, balancing accuracy and clarity is hard, especially when public expectation or misinformation play a role. The pilot also revealed anxiety about being misquoted or misunderstood. And another important insight we realized that was the motivation is strong when researchers see communication as part of their professional identity and mission, which is something similar we already learned from our colleague. They realize that is important when they think science communication not just a checkbox, for instance, for a grant application, but to sustain this that motivation, you need infrastructure. Things like institutional recognition, mentorship from experienced communicators, access to media training, graphic design support, and crucially, protected time. Without this, and I finish, even the most motivated researchers burn out or simply return to what their institutions actually reward, which is often still just traditional publication.
Thank you all for this inspiring exchange. We've heard 4 different voices so far, but there is a clear red thread connecting your contributions. Whether it's through platforms, training, or policy-oriented actions, all of these projects are working to make Open RRI more accessible, more systemic, and more sustainable. So I think this is really one first key takeaway from today. But let's now take a moment to really reflect on that and look ahead. I will ask each of you to share a final thought. In 1 minute, what's the key takeaway from your experience so far? And if you have to pick one practical policy recommendation to support the uptake of science communication and citizen science, and more in general of Open RRI, what would it be?
So starting from reinforcing as a European central hub on Open RRI, we always have a European perspective. So at the European level, I think it's really important to consider open and responsible research and innovation as strategic asset for Europe in order to deliver better research and innovation. Thus, research and innovation that are aligned with what society needs, research and innovation that are transparent and trustworthy, and so at the end of the day, research and innovation that could be also competitive. If Europe considers Open RRI as an asset, then it is needed to continue supporting it with funds and specific policies as the ones already designed and inserted in the new ERA policy agenda. Thus, let's continue this way, hopefully, also during the design of the Framework Program 10.
Maybe I can continue then from the ECS side. This is a really difficult ask. One takeaway, I have so many. So let's see if I use my minute properly. So what I have learned so far during my time as coordinating the ECS project is that citizen science is really uniquely qualified to translate, global policies like the Green Deal or the SDGs into local context so that everyone really can contribute towards them. And if everyone can contribute, we are that more likely to achieve it. But just to repeat what everyone has been saying, citizen science and public engagement in general, we suffer from a lot of the same challenges of efforts being fragmented and short-term, and so legacy can't be restored. So maybe if I can put both my ECS and EXA hats here, we have published many, many policy recommendations within both ECS and EXA, but I would say that a key thing that we need to advance the field is structural funding for umbrella organizations like EXA so that we can support with those challenges, so that we can harmonize, towards ending this fragmentation, so we can provide infrastructure to maintain important legacies of all these projects.
Yes, and from the patent perspective and thinking about our citizen science training modules, the key takeaway that I have is that there is a strong interest and positive engagement when researchers and students are offered practical and relevant training in citizen science. I think it's still challenging that we don't have really a strong systemic integration due to many of the resource constraints and lack of formal incentives that I talked about earlier. So my policy recommendation would really be to make societal engagement count in career progression and grant evaluations. And I also think that this should be backed with a dedicated funding and institutional support. And I think citizen science is uniquely situated to support these developments. And I think it should go hand in hand also with thinking about other open RRI skill areas such as the ones that we develop in pattern.
Well, from a science communication side, my key takeaway is this: science communication should be understood not as making science visible, but as creating an ongoing social conversation around science. It is inherently relational, cultural, and yes, deeply democratic. When researchers engage as genuine partners in dialogue with society, not just as experts broadcasting downward, science becomes more relevant, more trusted, and better aligned with public values. As for policy, my practical recommendation is similar to my colleague Christian. I mean, the most important recommendation is to integrate science communication into research evaluation criteria. And I mean at every level: hiring, promotion, funding, decisions. This means recognizing diverse communication practices beyond traditional publication. A well-produced podcast, a citizen science project, participation in public forums, contribution to policy debates, and equally important, I repeat, provide stable, structured training and institutional support so that researchers don't have to improvise everything from scratch each time they want to engage with public.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughtful reflections. I would say if there's one message that emerges clearly from this conversation and also from the latest pattern policy brief that we have published recently, it's that citizen science and science communication are not something optional. They are essential for building trust, broadening participation, and making research more responsive to societal needs. But strengthening competencies in these practices goes beyond creating new trainings. It requires the right institutional conditions and policy alignment, as we've said, to ensure that these skills are recognized, rewarded, and sustained, most of all, across research careers. So the projects we have heard from today are already contributing to that vision, and they are helping close the gap between science and society while reinforcing collaboration and upskilling across the European research area. That brings us to the end of this second episode of the Pattern Policy Podcast. We've heard how citizen communication and citizen science are helping institutions across Europe align with broader policy goals, like those set out in the ERA policy agenda. And we have collected meaningful insights from relevant EU projects that are directly contributing to the upskilling of European research careers and to the enhancement of excellent science across the European Union. So a warm thank you to all of our guests from Reinforcing, ECS, and Pattern for sharing your insights, your tools, and your ambitions, and for making this conversation so inspiring. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all.
Until
Thank you.
next time, thank you for listening, and let's keep working together to shape a more connected European research area. Thank you, everybody.